Okay, 8.2, we're going to talk about parallelograms. Most of this we've kind of discussed in that quadrilateral tree that we had, but that's okay. Just going to review some of the theorems. The objective, students will be able to recognize and apply properties of the sides, angles, and diagonals of parallelograms. So, let's define some terms here. A quadrilateral with parallel opposite sides is called a parallelogram. What do you know? If it has parallel sides, it's called a parallelogram. We're not very creative in math. Okay. We can be, but we're just not very creative in naming, right? Alright, so theorem 8.3 says that opposite sides of a parallelogram are congruent. So if we look over at this drawing here, we'll notice that they're already kind of marked in there, but we can mark them again just to make it a little bit more obvious. We see that the opposite sides are always going to be congruent in a parallelogram. So it's kind of like a rectangle that's been shifted or tilted a little bit. That's what a parallelogram is. And so it has opposite sides here and opposite sides here. And remember, a rectangle actually is a parallelogram. So we'll learn more about that later. But a rectangle is a parallelogram. Alright, so yeah, opposite sides are congruent. Next theorem is that opposite angles are congruent, or opposite angles of a parallelogram are congruent as well. So that's also in our drawing. We see these two angles are congruent. We see these two angles are congruent. So this is going to be very helpful when it comes to solving problems like this one. It says, given that the figure ABCD is a parallelogram, find the value of each variable. All right. Well, let's just work through this, okay? One more thing that I didn't note, and I probably need to note up here so we can apply this to this problem. But if these two lines are parallel, and by definition of parallelogram it is, what we really have here is we have parallel lines, right? Cut by a transversal. And then these two lines would be same side, or these two angles would be same side interior angles. And we learned back in, I think, chapter 3, that same side interior angles were supplementary if they're same side interior of parallel lines. So that means they add up to 180. Okay, that's going to be true with any consecutive angles, any angles that are like right next to each other. So these in a parallelogram. So these two are going to be supplementary, these two are supplementary, and these two are supplementary. And now we're going to take that, we're going to apply it down here. Well, if these two angles are supplementary, 100 plus what equals 180? Well, 100 plus 80 equals 180. So x has to be 80. Well, now if opposite angles are congruent, that means, right, these two have to be congruent, and these two have to be congruent. So that means that y is 100, because it's the same thing as angle B, and z is 80, because it's the same thing as angle C, or x. Alright, what about the sides? Well, opposite sides are congruent, so I know that BC is the same thing as AD, so I know that T equals 65. Also, I know that I should say AB is the same thing as CD, so I know that S equals 45. Alright, so I found all the variables just by knowing my properties of parallelograms. I know which parts are equal to what other parts on the parallelogram, right? Opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, and angles that are side by side are going to be supplementary because they are same side interior of parallel lines. Alright. Fun stuff. Next problem, this is one that I want you to do on your own. It says using the shape above. So we're going to use the same drawing, same figure. And my figure doesn't look that good. A, B, C, D. We're going to find the measure of all the sides and angles with this information here. So you may want to just kind of plug that in. So it says BC is 28 minus T. It says AD is 10 plus T. And it says CD is just T, and it says that angle B is 103. And we're going to find the measure of all the sides and angles. Okay, well, I'm going to let you guys do that. Look back on this thing. Remember, what things did we say were equal, right? Opposite sides and opposite angles. Well, same thing's going to be true in this drawing, right? Opposite sides, opposite angles. Okay, so give that a shot. I'm going to put the answers up there. You may want to pause the video now. Okay, let's talk about the angles first. Let's zoom in here. We knew that this one was 103. And so right away I knew the opposite angle here is also 103 because opposite angles in a parallelogram are congruent. And then I knew these two had to be supplementary, so I just said 103 plus what equals 180? Well, it's going to be 103 plus 77 equals 180. So if this is 77, then this one's 77. Okay. Now when it comes to the sides, I know that opposite sides are congruent. So I took 28 minus t and 10 plus t, and I set them equal to each other. And then I just did some algebra and solved for t, and I got t equals 9. Well, over here, CD is just t, so I know that CD is also 9. And then I plugged in t for AD and for BC, and I got 19 for the top and bottom. So the sides are, the tops and bottom is 19, and the left and right sides are 9. Boom. We got all the angles and all the sides. We are done with this problem. Let's go on to the next page.